Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's Thursday, February 27th, and we are looking forward to an overview of the superintendent's proposed budget for 2020-2021 school year. I'll make a motion to return to public session, seconded by Bill. Thank you. All in favor? 6-0. Terrific. Would everybody please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Terrific. We appreciate that this is the official start of budget season with respect to board deliberations, but we also appreciate that so many of you have been integrally involved in helping to build the budget over the course of several months, and thank you so very much for joining us tonight to be here for our conversation. Before we turn our attention to the budget, I think we're just going to go around quickly for some board announcements. May I start with you, Liz?
Yes, I don't have anything tonight.
Thank you. Julia?
I think since the last meeting, the wrestling team went to sectionals, and just want to congratulate the team who did a really amazing job. They had 13 wrestlers that actually went to sectionals and 7 who made all section, and 1 will be wrestling in the state finals this weekend. So
Thank you.
really terrific team.
Congratulations. Thank you. Terrence? Scott?
Just 2 minor announcements. So following up on sports, I had the pleasure of being at the girls sectional game last Friday night at Byram Hills basketball, which was very exciting and a very spirited game. Unfortunately, our girls did not win, but it was truly great to see the enthusiasm both on the Byram Hill side and our kids and parents that traveled to watch them put up a good fight. And on probably less important and less exciting news, just to help get the word out, just to let everyone know that I will not be running for re-election for next year.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Bill?
Hi, I have no distracting thing to say. I'll just have to jump to the same conclusion. I also won't be running for re-election this fall, and I encourage everybody to consider running. Their packets are available. I'm not sure how many signatures are required this year, but the way I look at it, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Hi, Aiden. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, nothing from me.
Okay, thank you. So for those of you who weren't with us at the last board meeting, Kim had mentioned that the packets were becoming available the Friday after that meeting, and if I'm not mistaken, 30 signatures are required on petitions, and we do appreciate you both mentioning, just to give the community sufficient notice that there will be 2 seats open, and I know we'll have ample time toward the end of the year to celebrate you and thank you for your service, but thank you for letting us know. I had just a few other announcements. First, just a few thank yous. I think since the last time we met, many of us had the opportunity to tour Meadow Pond Elementary School, and we really appreciated the tour. We spent a lot of time in classrooms. Thank you to our teachers for opening their doors to us, and thank you to our administrators for taking time out of your day to help us to learn even more about what goes on in the classroom. It was terrific, and we really enjoyed it. Thank you also to Andrew, who was a featured panelist at a breakfast hosted by Westput for a standing room only crowd of board members and administrators from districts across the county who are trying to move to healthier start times. And it was great to be in a position to talk about our experience with changing start times and having moved through a lot of stakeholder conversations and logistics really successfully. So thank you for that. Thank you to Town of Lewisboro for inviting us to a new neighbor social. Some of us had the opportunity to partner with Town of Lewisboro on that. It's exciting to see that we still have people moving into the schools, into the community rather, and specifically for the schools, many people mentioned, which was great. And then finally, I just wanted to say better late than never, that today I had the opportunity to go over to the Katonah Art Museum, Katonah Museum of Art, where we have 10 students with artwork featured, and I brought back some literature for all of us and wanted to just encourage everybody who's here today, if you haven't had the chance to go to the Katonah Museum of Art for the Young Artists exhibit, it's going to be up just through this Sunday. And in addition to celebrating the work of our student artists, many of you live in other districts, and some of you are alma mater, have your alma maters represented, and the artwork is just truly inspirational. This is the 37th year of this exhibit, and I wanted to thank Amy Stockfield and Diane Nerwin, both of whom have students with artwork either on the walls or on a table, because there's some sculpture featured also, and it really is so impressive. So if you don't have plans for lunch tomorrow, go to the art museum or go over the weekend. And that was it. Thank you. Andrew, do you have some announcements, please?
Congratulations and thank you to the folks who supported the science fairs at both Katona Elementary and Increase Miller earlier this week. Really wonderful events, packed in both cases, and lots of support from parents in putting on those events, as well as all of the school teachers and administrators who were there, and lots of enthusiasm for all the different science projects that were going on. So that was really exciting to see those. Next week, it's Sustainability Week at John Jay High School, so I wanted to put in a plug. Our students here at the high school will be hearing about that all throughout the week next week, so we're excited for that. While we're all sitting here tonight, there's a playoff hockey game going on between our school and a school just about 15 minutes to the south of here that I won't name. That's happening in Brewster. We might, if we're lucky, get some updates while we're sitting here. And then just total change of subject. Parents will know and staff know that we sent out some communications today about the coronavirus. So if anybody who's watching, the messages that we sent out are all available on our website, and we will continue to update the community as we learn any more information about that that's relevant to us here.
Thank you.
That's it for now.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, I think this brings us to our featured presentation for the evening, where we are going to learn about the proposed budget. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are very pleased to be able to present the budget for 2021, the proposed budget for 2021 to the board tonight. Tonight, we're going to go through an overview by way of this PowerPoint presentation of the entire budget, and then we're going to begin the process of going through the page-by-page budget that we'll get started on tonight. We'll go through about 12 of what we call the pink pages, and then the transportation section. Nora Beltran will come up and help us out with that. And then we'll leave it there for tonight and pick up there at about 8:30 on Saturday morning and go through all the remaining pages of the budget. But we will start tonight, as we traditionally do, with this overview. And I have the clicker, so I'm going to be moving the slides. I want to start, though, even before I move off the first slide, by saying thank you. There's a lot of people who are involved in the putting together of this budget, even though it's a few of us who are going to speak about it tonight. All of the administrators who you see sitting in the audience tonight had a tremendous role in putting this together, as did many other administrators who are not here tonight, as did many of our teachers and teacher leaders who've honestly been helping throughout the school year in helping us to get to this point. It is a lengthy process, and we appreciate all of that support. I don't seem to be moving anything. It's on.
Oh, it's-
The lights are on. Yeah. Technical difficulties. Okay.
Click ahead for you if it
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
work. Richard started to move. It's clicking.
Oh, you're clicking.
Oh, yeah, there it goes.
You? All right, take two. So, all those thank yous. And now we start, as we do every year, with our learning commitment, which I hope people by now are very familiar with. We talk here about engaging and relevant and active learning environments. The point I wanted to make here actually is a few days ago, a few of us were fortunate enough to hear a gentleman named Douglas Reeves speak. He's a renowned thinker in the educational field. He's been around a long time. And a part of the topic of his speech, which I think was on Wednesday of this week, was on the importance of staying with an initiative in school for over an extended period of time, that there's a tendency for schools to try something, to go only so far with it in the implementation stage, and then think, well, this isn't really working, and then switch to something new. So he really spoke to the importance of really staying with something for an extended period of time, which I really appreciate all the support the board continues to give us as we continue moving towards the aspirations of this learning commitment. It's not something that happens quickly. It's something that takes a lot of perseverance from all of our staff and a lot of learning together over a number of years. And we certainly feel good about it and think that we're making progress towards it, but we really appreciate the support in continuing to move towards that. So we move from the learning commitment onto our Board of Education's goals. And here we also appreciate our board's ongoing support in the leadership goal. The board speaks specifically to our learning commitment and to the support of that commitment. And then it's in the second goal that our board really speaks very concretely to what we'll be talking about tonight, which is the budget and the importance of fiscal stewardship. And you'll see, the audience will see there in board goal number 2, the importance to our board of adopting a budget that is fiscally responsible and does not exceed the tax cap, that strives towards sustainable contracts and strengthened partnerships, and that manages the district's infrastructure and human resources. And we feel very positive about the budget that we're presenting tonight as one that certainly meets those goals. So now we talk a little bit about the process that got us here tonight. As I mentioned, this is not something that's just happened in the last few weeks. This has been going on, even actually, I would say, since before the beginning of this school year, but this points back to the board's goals developed in September, then speaks from November through December of this past year, all the work that went on in the buildings and the departments to prepare all the different pieces of the budget that come together. Those pieces get presented to our central office review team throughout the fall. In December, we made a presentation to our board about the conditions in the world around us that we were aware of at that time, the conditions that influenced the budget that you're going to be seeing tonight. And then we continue to develop the budget around those conditions and with all of the things that our buildings are looking for as we move towards tonight, which is what brings us to where we are. Talk a little bit about enrollment in this slide. I'm sure everyone is well aware that our district did go through a pretty significant decline over a 10-year period or so in enrollment, a fairly dramatic drop of around 25% over that 10 or 12-year period in student enrollment. You can see now as you get to the tail end of the slide there of the chart that things do appear to be leveling off. So while the decline was steeper in the earlier years, it's much less so in the last 3 or 4 years. And as we project into next year, we're seeing a decrease of, I think, less than 0.5% in terms of our overall enrollment. Again, that's a projected number. And in fact, I did want to point out that the number for this year, 2919, when we projected that number last year, it was actually a lower number than what you see here. So the number of students that we actually have this year is a little bit higher than we were projecting. So if that continues into next year, then the decline would be even less for next year. But right now, we're projecting 2,905 students for next year. Now we get to the budget itself for the first time. You see up on this slide the number for the current, that's this year's budget, at top, $110,169,072. And then the budget that we are proposing tonight is $110,972,680. That's an increase of $803,608, a 0.73% increase from this year to next year. And we're going to go into these numbers in more detail later. David will take us through them in more detail. I just want to say briefly here that increase of 0.73 is the smallest increase that we've seen in the last 4 years of the budget. And the increase of $803,000 is accounted for, you'll hear more about this later, but the increase is accounted for almost entirely by increases in revenues that are not property taxes. You'll hear about a small property tax increase from this year to next, but the vast majority of that $800,000 is coming from increases that we're seeing in other kinds of revenue, not those produced by local property taxes. We will speak to that in more detail later. So now we talk about those things that drive us when we go to put together a school budget. And we divide them up into these four broad categories: school program, professional learning, enrollment and class size, and infrastructure. And now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the enhancements, some of the things that will be new, that we're excited about in next year's budget, starting with school program. So one item, one personnel matter that we're asking the board to support for next year is the addition of a school psychologist to provide support at the elementary level and to increase a program that the board has become familiar with in the last few years, our therapeutic support program, which is the program in our high school and our middle school to date that supports some of our more fragile students, students dealing with anxiety and other issues. And we are seeing those issues also in our elementary school students. And so we're hoping to bring a program similar to the TSP program into the elementary school level. That would be part of that psychologist role. Another piece of the role would be to give us further support in the area of some of the academic testing that we do at the elementary school level, which is very important to identify issues early in our students so that we can support them as best we can. So that's the first item. Second item in school program, board's heard about the implementation of new New York State science learning standards, and we have been piloting materials. We want to continue doing that. We want to find the best materials that we can for our students, and so though we piloted some materials this year, we'd like to pilot some. Our teachers have given us feedback on those materials, and in light of that feedback, we would like to pilot some additional new materials next year. Also in the budget is some continued commitment. I want to say a couple words about this. Some funds for continued commitment to provide flexible furniture for innovative learning spaces. You see some of that in the furniture that we're sitting on and sitting around here in the library tonight. We're very appreciative of this new furniture. What I wanted to say in addition about this is that our PTOs have been very supportive in this area too, and that in some of our schools, initiatives around flexible furniture have been supported by our PTOs. We really appreciate that. And in addition to the terrific support they provide, we'd like to provide some new materials in some of our other schools where they're not able to provide that support. You see the next bullet point is support for additional extracurricular activities depending on student interest. This is something that we've talked about in previous years with the board, the importance of having students be connected beyond the traditional school day, whether that's through sports, whether it's through clubs. We try very hard to support and grow interest in lots of different ways. Students being connected to their schools is really important for their growth and their success in many different ways. So we really appreciate the support we've seen in this area in recent years, and we hope to be able to continue providing for our students in that way. And then the last one would be something brand new for us, but it's something that we've started to see in some of the districts around us, which is the idea of live streaming of sports and arts programming from here on the high school campus. It's actually not that huge of a cost to do it, but it does require a certain equipment, and there's a local company that's been providing this service to a number of the schools in the area. It's a very nice service for families, in some cases extended families who might not be in the area, who could now see perhaps their grandchildren or their nephews and nieces playing in games here at school, and for our own families when they're traveling to be able to see games as well as performances in the auditorium, even things like awards assemblies. We'll look to see what other options we can support with that. But so we're excited about that. And those are the enhancements in the category of school programming. So now we turn to professional learning, the number of enhancements here that we're excited to propose to you tonight. The first being growth in the area of our staff developer positions. We're very, very thrilled to have the 3 staff developers that we have had in recent years. We think they've really made a great difference in the work that our teachers do in our classrooms. Our teachers are really appreciative of the support they provide and the learning that they help with. The 3 who we have currently are primarily, but not exclusively, in the humanities area, in literacy, to some degree in technology. But what we're looking to do and asking for support with tonight is to bring on board 2 more staff developers who would be dedicated to the areas you see there: math, science, computer science, and/or STEM instruction. These are obviously important areas in this day and age, or in any day and age, but we maybe think particularly important now. Computer science is an area that's it's actually a new tenure area here in the state of New York, and an area that we may see some growth in, would love to see some growth in the coming years. And so we're eager to find the right people to support in those areas. We're not being completely concrete tonight about exactly how those two folks would be divided and which areas exactly they might cover, because a lot of that would be dependent on the personnel that we would find to fill those positions. But we wanted to give you a general idea of the kind of work that we would see them doing. So those are the two staff developers. We want to continue focusing in the areas of social emotional learning and culturally responsive teaching practices. Those both happen to be New York State initiatives as well as local initiatives here that we're eager to continue with. You heard recently through an extensive reading presentation about our focus on early literacy practices, as well as our continued partnership with Columbia University Teachers College. So we hope to be able to support all of that work continuing too. Moving on now. In the area of class size, obviously this is very important to us to be able to maintain favorable class sizes for our students. And so for a number of years we've asked, and the board has supported the idea of these contingency positions. So this is essentially funding in the budget that's there and available to us should we need it, but that we say to the board we won't necessarily use unless the need is there, whether it's because we get a sudden additional enrollment in an elementary school, or our students in the secondary schools make some particular elective choices that we're otherwise not able to support. And these contingency positions give us the flexibility to support those student choices or those increased in student numbers. So we hope to have support for those contingency positions again tonight through this budget process. And then lastly, under infrastructure, and often infrastructure is more about renovations and maintenance, and some of it's that again tonight, but we're actually very excited tonight to put up there two new projects that really are about enhancing spaces that exist here on the high school campus. One is an interior renovation of our high school auditorium. We have two major auditorium spaces on this campus, the middle school auditorium, the high school auditorium. To be quite honest, when we're doing a community meeting or an opening day of school, we will tend to use the middle school auditorium as it is the newer, brighter, more technologically sophisticated space of the two. The high school auditorium has not been renovated in quite some time, and both for reasons of the large space meetings and instructions that can go on, but also because of the tremendous musical and theatrical performances that our students create in that space. We would love to give them a more modern space in which to do those things. We think it's somewhat overdue, to be honest, and we think there's great opportunity to create a really terrific space in there. So that's one project that we're very excited to put into this budget proposal. And then the next one is also here in the high school in the gym. It's focused primarily on the bleachers, but might involve some other enhancements that would improve storage, as well as some other things in the gym, but primarily it's about replacing the bleachers, which are, I believe, the original bleachers from the date when that gym was built in this space. So they've been around for quite some time, and they are due to be replaced. So we're hoping to do that through this budget too. And then the last one is an upgrade to a fire suppression system that exists at KES. As we know, KES is the oldest of our buildings, and it does have some features that are unique and different from some of the other buildings in the district. This fire system is one of those structures, and because it is there and it's part of the architecture, we are required to maintain it and upgrade it as necessary. And we've put money in the budget for next year in order to do that upgrade. So that takes us through the enhancements part of the budget. Now we're going to look at enrollment. The first slide, and we've been doing this now for a number of years. I forget exactly how many. So this is kindergarten for all three of the elementary schools. Kindergarten, as we always say, is the most difficult number to project. We don't know the exact numbers at the date as of tonight. They'll come more into focus in the months ahead. So rather than try to project them for each individual school, we put them together And in that way, we generally feel a little bit more confident about the sections that we're presenting. What I want to point out here, we show you both the current kindergarten, that's the first few columns there, October 2019, and the staffing of 10 sections, and then we project next year's kindergarten at 192 and 11 sections. The thing I want to say here, so you see 10 sections becoming 11 sections, but when we presented this slide at this time last year, we were projecting 166 students in kindergarten, and we thought we could accommodate them with 8 sections. So we had 8 sections in the budget, and then we had those contingency positions. Sure enough, the numbers went up a little bit. They went up to what you see there, 171. But as is often the case, it's more about where the students are, not necessarily exactly what the numbers are, and how we can then break them into individual sections. So it became evident fairly quickly last year that we needed to bump the 8 up to 10. So that 10 is, includes the use of 2 contingency positions, and now we're looking at needing 11 sections as we project for next year, with, again, the possibility that we may not be exactly right in our projection, but we feel very confident that with that number of sections and with the contingencies, we'll be in good shape in terms of kindergarten and other elementary classes. So now we move on to the individual schools. The first one up there is Increase Miller. And as we can often say, we can't say it in every case this year, but we can say it with Increase Miller, that as you look here, you see on the left part of the chart this year's sections and the class sizes they represent. And if you look on a diagonal, moving from this year to next year, you'll see that all the sections stay exactly the same. So if there are 4 sections in first grade at Increase Miller this year, there'll be 4 sections in second grade next year. The numbers stay pretty steady as the grades move up. You see a little bit of projected, these are all projected numbers again, a little bit of projected increase in some places. That represents where there's historically been an increase from one grade to the next. That gets reflected here. But there's no change, and you see the 18 total sections at the bottom stays 18 total sections at the bottom for next year. So that's Increase Miller. The next slide is Katona Elementary School. This one is a little bit different because in this slide, on the diagonal, the sections do not stay the same from each grade level to the next. Specifically, where they don't is this year's second grade, where there are 4 sections at 69 students. That becomes 3 sections next year. This is a situation that we've had in the recent past, actually, and this has to do with our goal and range numbers, which are lower in grades K2 than they are in grade 3 and then in grades 4 and 5. And so it's not terribly unusual. I'm going to say a little bit more about this for us, and it's always when this is the number, when it's 68, when it's 69, that's the number where you have to make the decision, are we going to have more sections and smaller classes in the earlier grades with the possibility that we'll then need to reduce the number of sections as they get older, or are we going to have them be a little bit larger to begin with? And actually, if you look at this year's first grade, right above this year's second grade, you can see almost the same number of students, 68 versus 69, and you can see that those students are currently in 3 sections with an average class size of 22.7. So, and if you're wondering why did we make that decision for this group and not the other group, I can tell you that when this group was in kindergarten, they were 61 students. So at that time, 3 sections made absolute sense for the 61 students, and we kept it at 3 as they became 68, and we'll likely keep it at 3 as they move on into second grade next year. They'll stay in the lower number of sections as they move on, whereas this year's second grade, at just 17 students in the class, when they move into third grade, they are well below our goal in third grade. So that's why we now move it to being 3 sections. We're still very comfortable with that class size of 23. I feel like I said way too much about all of that, but I wanted to try to explain it. So, so that's Katona. When we go to Meadow Pond on the next slide, that's just like the increase slide. Looking on the diagonal, there are no changes from one grade level to the next. The overall number of sections does change. You see it goes up by 1, and that's because we're projecting 3 sections in kindergarten next year and just 2 sections in 5th grade leaving the school this year. So there's an increase of 1 section at Meadow Pond next year. And you can see a little bit of increase in the size of the school at the bottom there too. That's, again, all of these schools are without kindergarten, as they're shown up here on the slides. So those are the elementary schools. Now we move on to the middle school. Here you can see that the middle school, and this is, as we know, is what's happening now, the smaller grade levels are moving up into our secondary schools now. So you can see that from 1920 to 2021, the overall size of the middle school is now decreasing, with a significant decrease primarily in 6th grade. And then when you look down to the sections at the bottom, you can see the 8 sections there projected for next year, reduced from 10 sections this year. What I will say to the board is that those 8 sections in 6th grade next year match the 8 sections that are currently in 5th grade. So the same number of sections in 5th grade is moving up into 6th grade and traveling with the students. So that's the middle school. Next slide is the high school. We're always very quick to say about the high school, very hard to project. With all of the changes and the electives and the choices that students make, we show you class size numbers here projected, but we don't make any promises that these will be actual class sizes when it comes to the high school. You can see overall the high school is also getting a little bit smaller next year. So when you think back to the overall enrollment, the elementary schools are actually getting a little bit larger at this point, the 3 of them collectively, and it's the middle school and the high school that are both getting smaller now. So that takes us through. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the staffing changes that are a result directly from those enrollment changes, and Alice is going to speak to these for us.
Say before, and then some you'll get more detail about on Saturday. So the overall change in FTE for general ed teachers is that we would be up 1.1. If you're sort of following all the parts, as Andrew said, we were up 2 kindergartens from budget to this year. And the secondary is actually down 0.3 ELA, 0.5 social studies, 0.2 world language for next year. And then they're up a 0.1 math. That's how we landed at the 1.1. Specials you'll hear more about on Saturday as well, but this represents an increase in PE of 0.8 and a slight reduction of 0.3 in music and performing arts, if that's the way the course signups go. In terms of what we need there. The psychologist Andrew spoke about before, and you'll hear more about that on Saturday from Catherine. Special services, that 1.0 reduction, that's actually a position we didn't fill this year, so it's not sort of a reduction in actuals, but it is budget to budget. RTI, that decrease is across the middle school and the high school and in math and ELA, and it's just based on need. In guidance, we have a 0.6 reduction of a counselor. In ENL, we have a 0.4 reduction. On paper, it's at the high school, but that always changes depending on where student need is. And then as Andrew mentioned earlier, and as Mary will talk about on Saturday, we have an addition of the 2 staff developer positions. On the next slide, for teaching assistants, we're up 3.0 next year. 3 of them, so there is actually 4, but then there's a reduction of 1. 3 are actually related to kindergarten, the 2 kindergartens this year that got added, plus the 1 that Andrew mentioned was anticipated. 1 is also slated for the middle school to have someone support technology, a teaching assistant supporting some technology that teachers are using in classrooms and with students. And then when you get to the aid line underneath and you see the 2 reductions, one of those is a lab aid being reduced. So we're going to not have a lab aid, and we have an opportunity where someone's retiring to then try another model with using a teaching assistant. And then the second aid position is related to a student who mid-year did not need the position. So it was filled in the fall, not currently filled, and we're not planning on filling it next year. Nursing staff, you'll hear from Chris on Saturday talking about a 0.5 increase. The model then next year would be 1 at each of our elementary schools, a full-time and a part-time at the middle school, and 2 full-time nurses at the high school. Again, we can talk more about that on Saturday. The bus drivers, Nora's going to speak shortly about her budget, but these are positions currently unfilled that we had budgeted for. We're not using them currently. We haven't budgeted for them next year. And the clerical reduction is at the middle school. So the FTE doesn't totally always combine. Usually we talk about teacher FTE, but you can sort of see the adds and the reductions, and we end up with the 1.69 reduction in total. It does not. Sure.
Detail the numbers with the budget?
Okay, just wanted to go and show you some of the history.
Okay,
We'll start with that. As Andrew had mentioned, the budget-to-budget increase of $803,608, and that's a 0.73% increase budget-to-budget.
Oops, seems to like to go two at a time. Oh, and now it's not letting me go back. Oh,
There we go.
there we go.
Okay, just to give you some of the budget history, over the last 6 years, we've averaged budget to budget, negative 0.015% in decrease. And as with the tax levy, we've averaged negative 0.17%. Also, as Andrew had mentioned, that this budget proposed at 0.73 budget to budget increase is the lowest one in the last 4 years. Okay. These categories, other than transportation, will be delved into more detail on Saturday. The interfund transfers, which is a transfer to both the capital fund primarily and also to the special aid fund. The special aid fund transfers relates to the district's share of extended school year program. And the transfer into capital deals with the projects that Andrew had mentioned earlier, with the project with the high school auditorium and the gym and the fire suppression systems, just to name a few. Our salaries, we're proposing a total district-wide salary increase of $430,627. Again, that's across the entire district. Operation and maintenance, and transportation, you'll hear about transportation more detail this evening, but that's an increase of $72,579. And curriculum and professional development, again, these are all excluding their salary because that's included all in the salary account. We're proposing an increase of $163,282. General instruction, this is all the expenses associated with direct instruction other than special education, and proposing an increase of $130,709. And pupil services and instructional computer, which includes guidance, social workers, psychologists, and extracurricular activities, along with the instructional computers. And we're proposing an increase of $127,377. The total of these increases is $1,138,774 for this page. Then we move on to the reductions, and again, these will be delved into more detail on Saturday, but we anticipate that we can reduce the employee benefits by an aggregate of $307,694, and that's primarily driven by our health insurance, which we've identified earlier as very good experience this past year is a negative 1.6%. And special education services, where we're reducing by $48,488. So that total decrease is $356,182, bringing the combined of the increases and the decreases that we've shown to $782,592, or it's accounting for roughly 98% of the budget. Moving to the tax levy. The tax levy, as people know, is the it's the 2% tax cap, which it is actually a cap. In some instances, like we've experienced over the last few years, where CPI was over 2%, where it was capped at 2%. However, it's 2% or CPI, whichever is lower. So this year, the CPI is 1.81%. Therefore, that is our actual tax levy increase that's allowed. and our assessment for growth factor, which is our brick and mortar allowance, which is a 0.32% increase compared to 0.41% last year. Okay, just to run through the calculation of the tax cap, we take this year's tax levy, which is the 97,948,497, and we apply the, again, the brick and mortar growth factor of 0.32%, and that produces an increase of $313,000 to the 261,932. And we take away last year's exclusions, which would be the 1,872,183, and then apply to that the allowable growth factor, which was the 1.81%. That brings our tax levy limit before exclusions to 98,134,403. We take that number and then we add back in this year's exclusions, which in this case are 1,897,737, which is $25,000 more than the previous year's exclusion. So these factors, which is the brick and mortar growth, the allowable growth factor, which is a CPI, and the change in our exclusions account for, bring us up to the 100,032,140 tax levy with the exclusions for next year. Okay, with the, as mentioned, the 100,032,140, just the proposed increase in this budget, tax levy increase is 17,087, which is 2,066,556 lower than what we would be allowed to present as a tax levy limit. Budget is presented as this. It only requires a 50% standard majority. If for some reason the board had presented a budget in excess of the 100,032, we would have needed a supermajority. And just to make clear, a couple other notes I wanted to mention is, in addition to the New York State tax cap, most of the contingent budget requirements are still in effect. That could be certain equipment isn't allowed, certain salary increases are not allowed, so they would still be in effect if this was not passed. The budget can only be presented to the voters twice, and if it's failed the second time, then the levy could not exceed the previous year's tax levy, which would be the 1920 tax levy. Moving on to budget, it's a little tiny, but if you look real close, you can see that the majority of the $803,000 that Andrew has mentioned is coming from places, other revenue sources than the tax levy. And the two primary increases that we see are the state aid and the county sales tax. And just to clarify the state aid portion, this is the budget to budget. So our state aid that we're receiving this year is a few $100,000 more than what we had projected last year. So our budget, our actual to this year's budget is more like $150,000 rather than, but budget to budget, we are estimating that we'll receive $537,000 more than we had budgeted for last year. And the county sales tax to make up to, as we knew that they got the additional increase in percentage, we anticipate at least another $205,000. So that really makes up the majority of the other revenue. And just to give you an idea of how that relates to the tax levy, go to the next page, excuse me. Taking our total budget this year of $110,169, reducing our revenue of $10,020,000, and our appropriated fund balance of $2,002,000 produces our levy of the $97,948. As you can see, this year's or proposed budget of 110,972,680. And you can see the other revenue in that big jump, and that's what's accounting for the majority of the budget increase. So that's going to 10,807,000, and we're remaining the appropriated fund balance of 2,002,000, which gives us the 97,965,584 proposed tax levy increase. And we move on to tax rates. What that does as far as the tax rate, unfortunately, we aren't able to say that we're one too far.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. We aren't able to say that everybody's experienced a reduction or a minor increase, but Bedford is anticipating to receive a 3.31% decrease in their taxes. Now, this is based on the assessments we have as of right now. These are subject to change, and they will change. And not every homeowner is going to experience the same decrease or increase based on your personal assessment and change of any kind of assessment. So this is just a general. And as far as Lewisboro, we're anticipating an increase with the assessed values that we have of 2.5%, and that's up to 211,007, or up $5.15 per $1,000 of assessment. Move to North Salem, and North Salem, we anticipate a reduction estimated to be the next year's tax rate to be $20.26 per thousand, or a decrease of 37 cents per thousand. And Pound Ridge, a reduction of 4.63%, estimated to be $109.77, decrease to $5.33 per thousand. Again, I'd like to just reemphasize that is all based on our current assessed values.
Thank you very much, Dave. We can't emphasize often enough, those numbers are subject to change, and that's beyond our control at this point. But then we're coming towards the end here now. We have one summary page that again shows many of those enhancements that we're happy to include in next year's budget. We show again there the total and the increase from this year's budget to next. And then we always show the propositions that our voters will see on May 19th this year. The first proposition outlines the budget itself and would give us the authority to collect that money, the necessary money from the taxpayers. The second proposition is, as we have now for quite a number of years, is a bus proposition that allows us to replace buses that are at end of life based on inspections from the Department of Transportation and the many hundreds of thousands of miles they have on them. And we are always quick to say that the money for this proposition comes out of this year's budget. We're not asking the taxpayers for the total there, which is $725,600. We're not asking for additional funds for next year's budget. We're asking for permission to move money from one line or certain lines in this year's budget into another line so that we can purchase these buses with funds that are remaining out of this year's budget. And that brings us to the rest of our calendar. So we are at the first line there tonight with our budget overview. On Saturday, we'll be reviewing in great detail the budget. Then we have meetings available to us should we need them on March 12th and the 19th. We've put a possible adoption date there of the 26th. We're required to do another hearing of the budget, which will, in a lot of ways, sound similar to tonight, prior to the vote itself. That's on May 7th. And then on May 19th is the day that both the budget and the open Board of Education positions are voted upon by the voters. And that date, again, is May 19th. That's the same date for every school district in New York State. That's a date set by the state. And so that's when we go to vote. And we thank you for that. And we'll take questions, I think, at this point before we then dive into the slides. Is that what we typically do? I'm looking to my colleagues. I think we would take some questions at this point.
Let's please. But first, thank you so much for the overview and for the thoughtful analysis of the educational needs of all of our students and our facilities. We really appreciate all that's gone into the development of the budget and the opportunity to ask some questions tonight. Thank you.
Sure.
That was great. Would anybody like to start with any comments or questions, clarification questions? Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, just remind me how we get the kindergarten enrollment estimation, because that's predicted to be over a 10% increase. That would be like a significant jump. Is there something afoot? Did we take over another town?
Yeah, we get that from a number of different factors, right? We do a census.
We do. When people enroll their children, they usually give us sibling information, so we have that. We do a relationship with the preschools in the area. And actually, we moved the kindergarten orientation for parents up a little bit this year, so some of it was confirmed by their attendance there. And now we're already doing the registration meetings with the registrar at the district office. So hopefully we'll have a very firm number. Maybe not before we adopt the budget, but before we vote in May. Hopefully we'll have a really good idea of who's coming to school.
And also, we do have a demographer to take care of. We get a report every year. That gives us that.
Because the enrollment numbers are a bit confusing. I mean, it's still going down overall. It's going down more slowly recently. It's sort of hard to say whether we're done with the, movement through the snake. I don't think we are. It still seems like there's some smaller classes following bigger classes. But I do agree that it seems to be slowing, and probably there'll be some more drops, but not too big.
There's definitely a little of that, Bill, where there's
Yeah.
sort of intermittent. You have one that's a little bit larger,
Right.
and then the year that follows it is
Right.
small again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other clarification questions before we take a deeper dive into a couple of sections? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Let's move on then. So we're going to turn our attention to the pink pages at the
Yes.
beginning of our budget books. And
Can I make one note? Just if the board members you've been given revised memo pages, if you could replace those in your budget book.
thank you.
Thank you.
One of the attachments is the pink pages.
Okay, so we're going to start on the pink pages
In the agenda, it's one
and go through 12 of them. Pink pages represent the general support pages. So the very first one that comes up, page 1, is the page reflecting Board of Education. And you'll see, if you look to orient you to the pages, down at the bottom right is where you'll see total of any kind of change, whether it's an increase or a decrease or no change at all. And on this page, you'll see that there is an increase of $4,063 in the board's piece of the budget. The primary driver in that change is to do with insurance. And we are generally seeing increases in the cost of insurance across the board.
Not that we're riskier.
Not that we're risky, no.
Based on us personally?
No,
or-
it's not, it is not based on personal risk. Do we have a reason for the general increases in
There
insurance?
must have been some settlements out there.
So we are part of a consortium, and most school districts are seeing an increase. This has to do relative to the new law that took into offense about sex offenders and going back a number of years. And it's really seen, although it wasn't intended for schools, the schools are seeing a hit. And because we are part of a consortium, we're absorbing some of those costs.
Thank you.
So that's where you see the primary increase on the board's page. The other increase is in BOCES services that are provided to the board for the video platform and some other services that we receive through BOCES. So some increases in costs there. And that's what's on the board's page. If there's questions about anything here, don't hesitate to just call them out as we go through. Moving to page 2, the pink page 2, this is the costs relative to the district clerk. And you do see, again, if you look at the bottom right, a small increase of, I shouldn't say small, an increase of $1,613 associated there primarily with employee compensation, which is the top half of the page. No other increases, a very slight decrease in supplies on the bottom half of the page. And that's pink page 2. Pink page 3 is the costs associated with the annual district election and budget vote. And you see here, no change at all. So exactly the same budget from this year to next. You do see an increase in one line that's offset by decreases in two other lines. Some funds moving around there based on, I think, actual budget costs in previous years and us making things a little bit more aligned to what actual budget lines were.
Can I ask one question
Yes.
on this page? Do our costs remain the same, independent of whether we get to use all the machinery we're entitled to, or whether we have to put ballots into boxes by hand? Do the costs just stay the same no matter what?
Pretty much.
Okay. This doesn't reflect that. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions about page 3? Moving then on to page 4. This is the page that reflects my office. And you see down at the bottom right, a decrease overall of $981. But it's really an increase on the top half of the page of $9,000, and then a decrease on the bottom half of the page of $10,000. And that $10,000 decrease is accounted for by a couple of different things. In a half of that decrease, about $5,000, is actually a reaccounting for a benefit line that's really been placed elsewhere in a more appropriate place in the budget. So you'll see a $5,000 increase reflected elsewhere. The other $5,000 of that decrease is, again, simply to more accurately reflect what have been actual costs in prior years. So we're trying to make the budget line up with what we've been spending in more recent years there. So that explains the decreases. Are there any questions about that page? And I'm going to turn it over to Danelle, I think, at this point. Who's going to take us on page 5 and moving on from there.
Right, so pink page 5 is associated with the costs related to the business office. Overall, you'll see that the budget is projected to decrease by $19,897. The top half of this page is associated with salaries of the business office staff. That includes the assistant superintendent, myself, a payroll benefits coordinator, accounts payable clerk, account clerk, bookkeeper. We also have a .2 FTE secretary that works between our office and Mary's office. And then in those staffing salaries is also approximately $9,000, which is for overtime and additional hourly wages. On the lower portion of the page, you see funds associated with equipment, contract services, supplies, travel and conference, which are projected to decrease $2,059. The contract services include asset management software, funds for our demographic updates, funds for 403 administrative compliance, and our financial advisors. Also, there is a second line of contract services, which is called equipment repair, and that includes funds to maintain our check writing equipment and also our copy machine, the leases and the maintenance and additional fees associated with those copy machines. There's also a budget line that includes attendance at various conferences, which ensures the office staff are properly trained to any modifications that might be related to the business office operations. The BOCES service line includes a subscription to our state aid planning service. Also, during the 1920 school year, we leased our copy machines through BOCES. Those will mature, and in 2021, we will lease those machines through another cooperative bidding organization, and those will be in a contract service line, so there's a slight reduction there. And then finally, the page ends with supplies, including office supplies, postage, and shipping associated with running the business office. On page 6, this page is associated with our auditors. Overall, you'll see a decrease of $1,863. So the district utilizes 3 types of auditing services. The first one is our claims auditor. He comes once a week and he reviews every single disbursement before it leaves the district. And he ensures that our vendors are being paid in compliance with our bids, our RFPs, and any agreements that we have with them. The second auditor we use is our internal auditor. He performs our annual risk assessment audit and works with the district's audit committee to identify the areas of audits, and this has to be done at least once a year. This is the internal office audit reviews financial policies and procedures, as well as practices and tasks of the district office. And then finally, we have our external auditor. They review our district's annual financial statements and determines if we are fairly presenting those financial statements and are in compliance. Any questions on those pages that I just went through? Page 7 is for our district treasurer. The state requires that we break out her line and the purchasing agent, which will be on the following page. So overall, you'll see that this will increase about $3,299. So the top half of the page is associated with salary increases. And then the lower portion of the page is for travel and conference and supplies for her office. Pink page 9 is related to the district purchasing agent. Overall, you'll see that this budget is going to increase by $2,277. The top half of the page is associated with the salary for the purchasing agent. $6,500 is budgeted for overtime, which is expensed during the summer month for our large volume of purchasing done to get the school started. On the lower portion of the page, you'll see funds associated with contract services, various non-BOCES bids, which we participate in, advertising and legal notices, and in-district mileage reimbursement, as well as BOCES cooperative bidding. Page 9, this is associated with the cost of our legal representation. Overall, you'll see that we're going to increase this about $18,413. This is a difficult area to prepare. The figures could change significantly, as we've experienced in the past, but depending on litigation brought against the district on labor matters or other matters which could involve the attorneys. These costs represent expenses paid to attorneys and other hearing officers not covered by our insurance. For the most part, we utilize the previous experience and any known escalators associated with hourly fees and retainers to project these costs. So hearing officers include special education hearing officers, superintendent's hearing officers, and labor officers. We also have a retainer. Those are for legal services that we pay a one-time fee, and then it covers any items such as policy review and questions and guidance for our policies, bidding costs, contract negotiations, vendor contracts, things of those natures. Then there's also a line for other fees and reimbursables for attorneys. These are funds that are paid on non-retainer matters. We also have a line for an attorney fee for bond counsel. If the board wanted to go out for bonding, the bond counsel would help us with the legal associated with that. They also are responsible to prepare annual compliance documentation. And then finally, we have attorneys for CSC litigation. Those are special attorneys that work with special education cases. Any questions on the legal portion, Rory?
I just have one quick question. So I just noticed that the hearing officers is a substantial increase over budget from last year, but last year was a substantial decrease over the prior budget. I just wonder, why did we budget only 25,000 last year, and why has it popped back up to 70,000? Is that?
So sometimes, because those cases span many years,
oh, I see.
we carry forward some of the expenses from previous years. So we're just trying
Oh,
to
it's
get a
based on
handle
open
on.
cases, so you're.
Right, so a case could span
Gotcha.
many years.
That's helpful. Thank you, thank you.
I think Danelle's going to take a break while I do
Yes.
page 10. So page 10 of the pink pages represents the costs associated with the personnel office. The overall proposed budget for these codes for the upcoming school year is $478,757. This represents an increase of about $4,400. The funds in these codes are used for the salaries of the staff who work in the HR office, as well as some funds for occasional hourly or overtime work for the support staff personnel. The focus of the Human Resources Office will continue to be compliance with our collective bargaining agreements and other HR mandates, as well as improvements to our personnel practices, including recruitment, certification, and training. On the bottom of the page, you'll see there are funds designated for advertising, supplies, and BOCES fees. BOCES services include some of our mandated trainings, software that maintains employee attendance, teacher evaluation, professional development records, as well as access to the Employee Assistance Program.
I have a quick observation there too.
Sure.
Alice, if that's okay. So on the superintendent's line item, I forgot what page that was, there was a reclass
It's the
of
same
10,000,
thing,
and I
yes.
see a reclass
It's
of
the same
5,000
thing,
here.
Yeah.
Should we expect to see that on contract services lines? And then I'm kind of curious then where that's been shifted to.
Yes, the business office folks will point out where it is.
That's been shifted to a benefit line, so you'll see that when we review the benefits.
Okay, are there others that have been shifted other than
No,
those?
those two, just those two.
So onward to pink page 11. This budget is associated with cost to properly maintain documents and records. It's an increase of $55. And this is just transferring records into a digital format, and we're continuing to do so where applicable. Pink page 12. This is for our public information. Overall, you'll see that this budget is projected to decrease by $5,666. The district secures services for a public information specialist through Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. We will continue to budget for this person to work 4 days a week, and we've also budgeted for the costs associated with making the website accessible to all and continuing that process. I think that is it for our pink pages tonight. Before I ask Nora to come up here, is there any other questions?
I have just one observation or question. And this budget doesn't depend on this question, but we hear about new mandates from time to time, and one that I'm thinking of right now is this transparency report, which has come up in a number of contexts, and you've informed us intermittently about some aspects of that. And we have had this conversation at past budget deliberations, but we never really track things all that meticulously. And I guess I am wondering if it would be possible, not right here on the spot, but especially with something like the transparency report that seems like a prime candidate for trying to estimate the cost to the district when I look out over the pink pages, and also, thinking about the folks who are joining us here tonight. I just would put in another request that, to the extent possible, if we can pick a mandate and try to quantify the expense, that information can be helpful to us when we're trying to advocate more broadly with some of our colleagues from other districts.
Well, we've just finished one of those reports recently, so we can assign some of the costs that the treasurer spent
I
quite a
would
bit
really
of time
appreciate that.
preparing, so.
Thanks.
And then the original one that was submitted in August also took probably quite a bit of time. So we'll try to give you some idea of time and how much that would actually.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, comments before we transition? Thank you so much. Great.
So this time, Nora Beltran is going to come up and speak a little bit about transportation. Those are the yellow pages 1 and 2.
Thanks for joining us,
Thank you.
and for
having
these.
me.
Thank you.
There are 2 pages, like Danelle said. The first page represents the cost of operating the transportation office, as well as bus driver salaries and monitor salaries. Also included are expenses associated with fuel, bus parts, tires, insurance, driver physicals, contracted repairs, and contracted transportation. Overall, you could see the 5510 budget codes are projected to decrease by 34,773. Staffing in this section includes 4 office staff, me, my assistant, a head bus driver, and our dispatcher. We have 56 6-hour bus drivers, which is down from 62 last year. We have 4 custodial part-time drivers and 9 bus attendants. Contract services for equipment repair is work that we really cannot do in-house. These are big overall engine overhauls, significant body damage, or any work that would lay up our big bus lift, our only big bus lift, for too long. We are projecting an increase of 10,000 in this area. Contract services also include expenses for radio services, which is NICOMCO, which has our GPS. Contracted transportation, which is the coach buses for our field trips and our athletic trips. DOT fees and waste oil removal. Bus parts and supplies. These are the parts and supplies that we need to fix our buses. And just to give you an idea of this year, we have a number of 2013 Bluebird pushers that all seem to need a turbo boost actuator replaced. And each of those turbo boost actuators cost $5,000, and we have replaced 6 of them. That was a cost we weren't really anticipating. As mentioned above, the overall budget associated with this page is projected to decrease 34,773. On the yellow page 2, this reflects the cost associated with the mechanics in the bus garage. As board members may know, that we service all our buses and vans at KES, where the bus garage is located. We have 6 mechanics and 1 head mechanic. Our mechanics are responsible for maintaining our fleet of buses and vans, as well as O&M fleets. Each of our buses and vans are inspected by a New York State inspector twice a year, and our DOT rating is 99%. Our mechanics really do an excellent job of ensuring that the vehicles are fit to cover the more than 1,060,000 miles we've logged. Overall, you can see the budget for 5530 budget codes are projected to increase $7,089, bringing the overall budget decrease to $27,684.
That's page 1 and 2.
Page 1 and 2. Any
Thank you,
questions?
Nora. Any questions?
So I wonder if we could just speak to a little bit the philosophy why we as a district choose to have our own drivers and our own mechanics as opposed to outsourcing those types of services, because I think, you know, different districts will choose different ways of serving that need. And I think that I personally have a position as to why this is a good thing. But I'd like to just kind of, you know, because I think some people don't quite understand why we do that. So I think it might be a good opportunity to just kind of talk about that a little bit.
I believe it's a good thing because I have a lot of control, or we have more control of the people that we hire. I also believe that when you work for the district and you're a part of the retirement system and you're a part of the whole, I feel you have happier employees, and happier employees and bus drivers make a better ride and a safer ride. And I wouldn't hate to see it go anywhere else. I think our in-district transportation staff does a great job. I'm out there every day. I'm supervising. I think we have a good thing, and I'd like to keep it going.
I also think that with contract services, sometimes you don't get the stability that we have with our bus drivers. And the children students really like to see the same bus drivers, and I think we have more of a connection with our students having the seniority in our bus staff.
We don't have a lot of turnover. The
Right.
drivers stay,
Yeah.
which is a good thing.
Yeah, and and I'm happy to hear you all say that. And again, as a parent and as a, excuse me, as a board member, I see the same things, and I feel the same things that you feel, which is that we have more sense of quality control. We're able to have investment with our staff who, feel ownership over the service that they provide. And, and my children, they know surprisingly, I feel like they know all the bus drivers. It's like, oh, so-and-so drives such and such's bus. And so I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just add, if I may, that I think it was the 2017 school year, I sat on the finance committee, and we spent the entirety of that school year evaluating whether there was a benefit to be gained by outsourcing the buses. And there was a whole study and a presentation that I'm sure we can resurrect, Terence. One of the other things we thought through was that once you divest of your fleet, there's no going back. So although there was some minor benefit financially, for all of the other reasons that have been cited, we really felt that it didn't make sense at the time, and we felt that had we made the decision, that there would be no way to reverse that decision in future because of the significant investment that you would need to make up front. So for many reasons, and there is a deck out there that we can share.
Yeah, I remember that one of the takeaways was that for a district of our size, geographically, that it was actually surprisingly not all that
Very, very minimal.
much of a difference financially.
56 square miles, if I remember.
So there were some interesting findings there. And then also, somewhat related to your question, a few of us have been having conversations with counterparts in other districts recently where, totally unsolicited, we've actually gotten some feedback on our model that was, I would say, very positive, and where these individuals looking from the outside in were quite envious of what we've been able to accomplish with our fleet. So that was good feedback from the outside.
Could I just ask one question? You mentioned the number 1,060,000 miles. That's over what time frame?
July 1st to June 30th.
So school year.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And
Not at one time.
I think it's also, I just wanted to observe that we're so fortunate that our numbers are as close as they are to what we thought we would need when we made the change last year to change our transportation model. It was a significant change, and it has gone so smoothly, I think, from everybody's perspective that it's hard to remember that we just made that change this September. So this is terrific to see that we were able to forecast as accurately as we did, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Nora.
Are we talking about recreation also? There's one more? Are we
I
doing-
think that gets picked up by
We do.
Paul.
7140 is for tonight.
Yellow page 3?
Yeah, the third yellow page, doesn't that move on to Saturday?
it's
It
on
was on
tonight.
tonight.
Oh, it wasn't tonight?
It was,
Oh, my
it
apologies.
was.
But we can go over it.
We can speak to it real quick.
Okay.
Sure.
So that 7140 is associated with community service. This is for custodial services related to Parks and Rec, renting our gyms. This is separate from LES. This is if they need to use the gymnasiums at Meadow Pond or in Crease Miller. It's the custodial salaries associated with those staying late. And we see that we're going to increase that about $5,725. And that the way we calculated that is just based on past usage.
Great. Thank
Thank
you.
you. That wraps up all that we intended to cover tonight. We're still happy to take any other questions that you might have, and otherwise, we'll be picking up here at 8:30 on Saturday. Continuing.
Terrific. Thank you. We're actually about to turn our attention to public forum. We're just wrapping up agenda item 6.03. And I just wanted to quickly take a pulse with everybody because we are a new board to make sure this is the process we're comfortable with. This is, the pace that we'll go at on Saturday. We'll pause periodically after a few pages, ask a couple of questions and revisit. Okay, terrific. So then I think, thank you again to the administration and thank you for the budget overview. We're looking forward to Saturday. And if tonight is any indicator, it should be pretty efficient and, and smooth on Saturday. So we're looking forward to that.
Knock on
Yeah.
wood, as we say.
Yep, and that does bring us to public forum, and I know, thank you to members of the community who've joined us and for your patience. At least one person has been waiting to speak with us, so please, Tom Kiley, I invite you to come to the podium and share comments that you might have. Oh,
No,
I'm
it
sorry,
has
we
to be
need to capture
recorded.
your comments on the mic. Thank you, though. And you're welcome to speak to any matters pertaining to tonight's presentation or to other district matters. We do request that you try to limit your remarks to approximately 3 minutes at the podium.
Usually at the podium.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Kiley, and I'm bringing up the mascot again. It's been brought to my attention. I don't really do Facebook, internet, read newspapers, but it came to my attention by several people throughout the town of Bedford. So I had a board meeting with the local supervisor, and everybody in the townhouse basically agreed that it's a shame that this did not go in front of a public hearing to begin with, and who is really the board to decide what's best for the tax-paying people when the mascot has been here for over 80 some odd years.
Let me just back up to explain that we don't engage in a back and forth during public forum. This is truly the community's opportunity to speak with us, and we're here to listen to you. So we don't engage in back and forth, but later in the meeting during board dialogue, board members will have the opportunity to speak as a board with one another and to reflect on anything you share with us now.
Okay, so then, two little kids here decided to take among their own, and they went out for the last 2 days, and they got petitions signed throughout the town. And in 2 hours after school each day, the amount that they got, it's like almost embarrassing for not even going to a vote session on it, considering how many people's for it. And then I even hear now it's sponsors and donors, people in the school who give money, or in stores, they refuse to. Lifetime person here who started right with Katona Elementary, graduated from there and was an Indian, still an Indian, and she's the head of the Historical Society. This has never been brought to anybody's really attention. It's just been offensive between you board members, and it needs to go. I mean, shouldn't it really be brought on among the town people, even considering how much it's costing? If it's even costing that much, it could even cost more. Right?
Thank you.
And then I want to give you these here of what most of the town store, town owners, board members from the town of Bedford all sign how disgraceful it is to, just among your board, to have your own, yes, let's just do it and get rid of it. Do you know how long the Indians been here? And is it okay that board, everyone sitting here, it's like blackface is so bad. Now, there's been several schools.
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to please step back to the podium and speak into the microphone. And thank you.
It's been brought to my attention, too, that several schools, there's one out west where there's a Thomas Hart Benton painting, a beautiful mural, and it depicts George Washington with slavery. And that's a big controversy now. They're making them cover it up, remove it, try to sell it. Now that we know that John Jay, really, it's Katona Lewisboro. Where did John Jay come about? After the school over at the homestead, right? But now we know he's a slave owner. Now, did we ever beheaded like statues of our Indian? Does any of you even know where the Indian statue is of Chief Katona? Guarantee you probably don't. So, I mean, he does exist. There is a statue of him. He was never beheaded, belittled, defigured, anything. And for us to take them and say, because a few people don't like them, and remove them without a public vote is kind of like totally off the charts.
Thank you.
And then, no, I'm not done yet. And then reading the, what the new mascot should fall under. I guess you guys came up with that, right? So now I'm reading it can't be of a person or any like type of religion, any type of weapons, any type of this and type of that, and it has to be non-gender. Now, with religion, there's animals involved. So now the mascot can't really even be based on an animal because some religions are sacred to certain animals. So any person can basically be offended by an animal we use. So if we're offended by an animal, I could be Hindi, and if you guys use a cow, I could find that, again, in the same boat. Now we go with non-gender, right? So now it's leaving us to something that runs into a football team looking like what? Hi, we're butterflies. We're supposed to be here for victory. We're supposed to be here for fighting. Now, if you go to the non-gender, it's either masculine or feminine, right? Now it goes into a color breach. Now, when you look up that, it goes with color. So now what kind of mascot would you design when it has to be color neutral as well as color gender? A jellyfish? I don't know. I think we should just all reconsider the Indian and just leave him where he is and honor him. I mean, the police department's discussed it with it in the town of Bedford. The fire trucks have him on it. The ambulances, as we know, just got a new one. They have the Indian on it. They're disgusted with the whole situation. And it goes, the list just goes on and on. I mean, maybe it wasn't brought to the board's attention how long the Indian's been there and what it's on and what it means in the town.
Thank you for speaking with us. We
Okay.
appreciate your perspective.
And then
Thank
it's
you.
even the tax money. I mean, do we really know? Doesn't it quote it in a thing here that it will probably come from leftover budgets? Probably doesn't cut my cake. Probably means yes or no. I don't know where that's coming from. And I have that, spit it out here if you want to see where he said probably. I couldn't do a budget if it was just said probably. And I'm sure you all agree with that too.
Mr. Kiley, can you help us anticipate approximately how many more points you'd like to make?
I can go on the rest of the night with it if you want.
We do request the community members try to speak with us for approximately 3 minutes.
Okay.
And it's been going on quite a bit longer
No, I
than that. So
understand.
if you have something
I mean,
written
the
that you'd like
next-
to
as I
leave
said,
with us.
The next step will be going to court with it. And I have no problem in doing that.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you for speaking with us. Is anybody else waiting to speak with us during public forum who hasn't signed up or didn't realize there was a sign up? Okay. If not, then I think we're ready to turn our attention to the consent agenda. And I'm not aware of anything that needs to be voted on separately tonight. So I'm going to move the consent agenda if somebody wants to second it. Liz, thank you. And then I just wanted to pause briefly to invite Andrew to just share a couple of words with us about one item.
I want to reference, we have some resignations for the purpose of, we have one resignation for the purpose of retirement tonight. And I want to draw attention to Ms. Priscilla Luco, who is retiring at the end of this school year as a teaching assistant in the kindergarten at Meadow Pond Elementary School. Ms. Luco has been with the district approximately 22 years, I believe, and is an absolutely wonderful employee and the kind of person that you want to have in schools, the kind of person actually you would want to have in any organization, the person who you want to see every day, who warms a building, who warms the lives of the children who enter that building, as well as all of her colleagues. Priscilla has been a historian for us. She's actually, I would have to say personally, she's one of the quickest people to respond to any of the emails that I send out, and always with a positive word. And she's just an absolutely lovely presence in the building, and she will be missed. She has spent every single year of her career in the district as a kindergarten teaching assistant, which is really pretty amazing to have that kind of dedication. She's a tremendously dedicated employee, And we just wanted to take a moment to wish her all the best in her retirement and to thank her for the many years of wonderful service that she has given to the children and to her colleagues. And we know that she's a member of the community and hope that she may choose to remain connected to our schools in some way after her retirement. But we thank you, Priscilla.
We really appreciate that. Thank you. That was so well said. And I was going to just add to the list that I know she's a beloved neighbor to many community members. And so thank you for also mentioning that. And we wish her all the best in her retirement. Thank you. I think with that, we can vote on the consent agenda unless somebody else has a question or concern. Okay, if not, all in favor? 7-0. Great, thank you. And that brings us to board dialogue and discussion. I'm not sure whether any board members had topics for this evening or other items they might wish to discuss, comments they might wish to offer. If not, we're going to be together again on Saturday, so perhaps people want to collect their thoughts and bring them for Saturday. I don't mean to rush us going once, but if not, then we will look ahead to future meetings. And as was mentioned, we're going to be back on Saturday here in the library.
Why go home? Just
8:30 a.m. because we have to go to the Katona Museum of Art in between now and then.
I'll mention one thing. John Jay is winning its hockey game 2-0 at the end of the first period.
Thank you. Thank you. And then the board is next scheduled to meet, as was mentioned earlier. We have a few meetings, quite a few, built into the month of March, and it's a little bit of TBD based on how things go on Saturday, but we are scheduled to meet Thursday, March 12th, Thursday, March 19th, and Thursday, March 26th. And the Finance Committee will meet Tuesday, March 24th, 7:30 p.m. in the district office. Policy scheduled to meet Friday, March 27th, 8:45 a.m. district office. And I think the Sustainability Committee is meeting March 6th, Friday morning, March 6th. Right? 8 a.m. I'm pretty sure. I think so.
believe so, yeah.
Maybe we can just check on that.